Order, order. I will call Helen Whately to move the motion, and then I'll call the Minister to respond, and there will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up, as is the convention, with these 30-minute wonders. I call Helen Whately to move the motion. Order.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For centuries, the view from Graveney Church Tower has been spectacular. A view across miles of marshland to the Swale beyond. In the summer, wide-open blue skies, sheep grazing in the sunshine among the rushes, down to the sparkling water of the estuary. In the winter, still beautiful if bleak, clouds scudding across a grey horizon, down to the froth of white horses on galloping waves, accompanied by the cries of seabirds calling as they circle overhead, buffeted by wind and rain. This epic landscape inspired great British writers like Charles Dickens and Daniel Defoe. And since then, it has continued to inspire countless visitors and locals alike. The backdrop for walkers travelling the ancient Saxon shore way, a haven for bird watchers and the seabirds they've travelled to see, or just a place to find peace and tranquillity in our otherwise busy lives. But no more. In 2020, planning permission was granted to build Cleve Hill Solar Park. In 2021, Cleve Hill Solar Park was acquired by Quinbrook Infrastructure Partners, a US investment fund based in Texas. And in 2023, construction began. Now, as we near the end of 2024, the work is nearly done. Soon the village of Graveney in my constituency will host the UK's largest solar power plant, generating 373 megawatts of electricity. And alongside the solar array, the developers have permission for a large-scale battery installation with up to 700 megawatt-hours of capacity. The concrete base for the batteries is being constructed, and the batteries themselves are now in the country, soon to be installed. The plant is set to become operational early next year. Madam Chair, as I speak about this huge solar installation in my constituency, make no mistake. I recognise climate change as one of the greatest threats to our planet and our way of life. I want to see us continue our shift to renewable energy, to reduce our carbon footprint, and to improve our energy security, and that includes solar. I welcome solar on factory and warehouse roofs, on housing developments, on brownfield sites, even in out-of-the-way pockets of poor quality land, but Cleve Hill is altogether different. The solar park will cover more than 700 acres when it's complete, an area larger than the town of Faversham itself. It will have not far off 1 million solar panels, each the height of a double-decker bus. No amount of natural screening can prevent this huge installation dominating the landscape. And it's not just about the views either. The marshes were home to rare species, including Brent geese, golden plover, marsh harriers, and the red-listed lapwing. The humble dormouse and water voles also thrived in the dikes and field margins. Before the Cleve Hill solar team arrived, there was a totally different vision for this spot. The Environment Agency planned to restore the marshes to a wetland. This would have provided a haven for the wildlife, sequestered carbon, and acted as a natural flood defence. As someone who has stood knee-high in floodwater in my own home, I do not take this risk lightly. As many as 17,000 homes are at risk from rising sea levels along the North Kent coast. But unfortunately, the planning inspector only considered the solar development against the agricultural land use at the time. So instead of Graveney's marshland being transformed into a haven for nature and a release for rising seawater, it's been transformed into an industrial zone. Over the years since the solar scheme was announced, I have received hundreds of letters and emails from people asking me to stop it. I've worked with Graveney's excellent parish council, the Save Graveney Marshes campaign group, and then the GREAT campaign. All have worked hard to give the community a voice in the planning system, but to no avail. As a nationally significant infrastructure project, the final decision was taken away from local residents and our local council. When planning inspectors recommended the development should go ahead, I'm told there was little room for the Secretary of State to go against their recommendation. Even though only 15 out of 867 public representations supported the project. Like many people, I was gutted when it was approved. But we are where we are. Since then, like the campaign groups, my focus has switched to trying to reduce the harm and risks to the local community and to try to claw back some benefit. And that is why I've secured this debate. I'm here to raise three main areas of concern expressed by my constituents: safety, disruption, or in fact damage, and compensation for the community who now have an industrial site on their rural doorstep. This is important to my constituents, but I know also important to communities around the country facing large-scale solar developments. They too will want to hear what reassurances the Minister can offer. I'm happy to give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
First of all, congratulate the Honourable Lady for bringing it forward. And the issue of disruption is incredibly important. And my constituent, just to give an example, I have a number of quarries, and I know only too well the damage and enhanced wear and tear that can have on the smaller roads of a countryside area. And I think that's what the Honourable Lady, don't know her constituency, but I'm presuming that's what it is with the Honourable Lady as well. So does the Honourable Lady not agree that the HGV traffic over a number of years, the road safety implications must be a priority for the construction company? And the only way, Madam Chair, to address this is to have open communication with the local community and appoint persons to deal with issues as they arise. Has the Honourable Lady been able to persuade that construction company to do just that?
Well, the Honourable Gentleman makes a really important point, and I will come to address exactly this point in a moment. But firstly, I just want to talk about the question of safety, because the biggest worry for my community now is safety, the safety of the large-scale battery installation. To give you a sense of the scale of that, Cleve Hill's battery capacity will be equivalent to half the output of a small gas-fired power station. Large-scale battery storage systems carry risks, including overheating and fire, which can lead to toxic fumes and water contamination. There have been more than 65 fires and explosions reported in similar battery storage systems across the world to date. In March, I hosted a public meeting about battery safety attended by Matthew Dedman, Assistant Director at Kent Fire and Rescue Service and the National Fire Chiefs Council Lead Officer for Alternative Fuel and Energy Systems. Almost 50 Graveney residents attended the meeting, demonstrating the considerable local concern. Matthew Dedman provided some reassurance to the meeting, outlining the steps that the developer is taking to put in place safety features which are set out in the project's battery safety management plan. But this has not allayed residents' fears. Battery fires are notoriously difficult to extinguish, and people at the meeting found it hard to believe that the fire and rescue team at Faversham Fire Station, fabulous though they are, or even across East Kent more widely, would have the specialist equipment required. There's also the question of contamination of land and water in the event of a fire. Another outstanding concern was the lack of an evacuation plan in the event of a fire. The rationale we heard is that no evacuation will be needed because toxic fumes and smoke will dissipate and it will be sufficient to close windows. However, residents and parents whose children attend the local school remain unconvinced. Added to that is the potential for a five-fold expansion of the current battery proposal found within the site's battery safety management plan. While this may or may not happen in practice, physicist and former Vice Chair of the Faversham Society, Professor Sir David Melville, CBE, warns that the site does not have adequate space for this increase in battery capacity, whilst maintaining the 6-metre spacing between battery units advised by the National Fire Chiefs Council. In fact, Kent Fire and Rescue were only satisfied with the site's battery safety management plan on the basis of the 6-metre gap being adhered to. I'm not alone in raising these concerns formally. In fact, Swale Borough Council scrutinised and rejected the battery safety management plan earlier this year, but now their rejection has been overturned by the Planning Inspectorate, leaving the community with unanswered questions and feeling they have no say in the matter. Now, I know I'm not the first member to raise these sorts of concerns. Just over a year ago, a former energy minister said the government intended to consult on including battery storage systems in the environmental permitting regulations at the earliest opportunity. I take that to be an acknowledgement that the current system is not up to the job. One moment. I asked ministers for an update on the timetable for this consultation in a written parliamentary question in September, to which I received the following response. The government agrees with the need to have robust measures in place to manage the risks associated with facilities that use large numbers of lithium-ion batteries. DEFRA is considering further options, including environmental permitting, for managing the environmental and public health risks from fires at BESS sites. So, can I ask the Minister, when she sums up, to advise me whether they will be adding battery storage systems to the environmental permitting regulations, and if so, when will this consultation take place? If not, what approach to ensure safety of large-scale batteries do they intend to take? And in the meantime, could you tell me what agency is responsible for ensuring the safety of this development? Who will be inspecting it before it is switched on? And how will she be assuring herself that these batteries are safe? I've been in her shoes, albeit in a different brief, and that's a question I know I would have been asking myself. This is important, not just for Graveney, but for the whole country. Large-scale batteries look likely to be an important part of our future energy infrastructure, and that means we need to do this properly. Residents' concerns can't just be brushed aside as an inconvenience. We need a proper process which takes these worries seriously and makes sure that large-scale battery installations are safe. I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Thank you to the Honourable Member for giving away. My constituency, neighbouring Ashford constituency, also has got a big solar farm planned going through. And listening to some experts recently who highlights the risk of fire from these large batteries and toxic fumes, and also some of these the farms are being planned in the rural areas where the fire engines may not be able to access. These are the genuine concerns. So we should, would the Honourable Member agree that the local concerns need to be addressed before these planning permissions being approved?
The Honourable Member does indeed make an important point. It's one reason why I say this is clearly of great concern to my constituents in the village of Graveney, living close to the solar plant and the battery installation, indeed the town of Faversham nearby as well. But we need to get it right in Graveney, and then we can use that approach to get it right in other places, because this is not the one and only large-scale battery installation we expect to see. As I said, this is likely to be a part of our future energy infrastructure. So let's get it right in Graveney and across the country. The second area of concern I'm to talk about, and this indeed was referred to by the Honourable Member for Strangford in his intervention a moment ago, is the impact of construction on local residents and in my constituency on the village of Graveney itself. Residents and the schools have put up with many, many months of heavy construction traffic. It's been down to the hard work of the community and people like Mike Newman, the Parish Council Chair, who have sat down with the developer to come up with an effective traffic management plan. That has mitigated the impact, and I do recognise that the developer has played their part, for instance, restricting lorry movements at certain times to accommodate the school. But even when construction ends, residents will be left with the consequences. Some houses have cracks in their walls thanks to the huge lorries thundering past day after day, and the lane through the village will need resurfacing. The community are looking to the developer and hoping that they will stick to their word to make good any damage. But the worry hangs over the village all the same, not least because no such requirement was part of the planning process, nor is it set out in law. Which brings me to the final outstanding concern. When an unpopular planning decision is made locally, there is at least the silver lining of a Section 106 or a community infrastructure levy contribution that can go towards a new school or GP surgery or similar community facility. Not so with a nationally significant infrastructure project. Now, I know that one of our challenges as a country is the time it takes to build any new infrastructure and the cost, and I have no appetite for making that worse. But it's hard to stomach that a small village like Graveney could find itself hosting a power station, in effect, and having nothing by way of compensation. I am grateful that the developer has indicated that they will make a significant community contribution, but I know that there's a discussion about the potential for a longer-lasting approach which could support the community over the lifetime of the project as an alternative to a one-off. But this does beg the question of why is the community left relying on the goodwill of the developer? I know her government intends to do a big overhaul of the planning process with the objective, rightly, of making sure we get better at building infrastructure. Can I suggest that one way of improving this is to make sure that there's something in it for a local community, especially when, as is the case here, they bear the brunt with no discernible local benefit? Madam Chair, I will sum up to give the Minister time to reply. I accept with regret the reality of Cleve Hill Solar, the UK's largest solar installation, and the large-scale battery storage that comes with it. But what I do not accept is the failure to address residents' concerns about safety, the failure to give residents certainty about repairing the damage from construction, and the feeling that the community is on their own negotiating for compensation from the developer for the industrialisation of the marshland that they hold so dear. On all three counts, I am seeking the Minister's assurance and action. To be clear, I'm not advocating for more red tape. This is about doing something better, not making it harder. In fact, get this right, and you can improve how we build energy infrastructure in this country, and that is important. We need more renewable energy generation capacity to meet our future energy needs in a world where economic growth is likely to be dependent on energy-intensive computing power. All our futures depend on this. So let's make sure we get it right, starting right here, right now, with Cleve Hill Solar.
The question is that this House has considered the impact of Cleve Hill Solar Park on communities in Faversham and Mid Kent constituency. Minister, Kerry McCarthy.
Thank you, Dr. HoC. Always a pleasure to see you in the chair, and may I begin by congratulating the Honourable Lady for securing this debate and giving us a chance to discuss what is a very important topic, not just for her constituents. I hope she will understand, however, that due to the role that my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, plays, the quasi-judicial role in taking decisions on applications for development consent for energy infrastructure proposals, it would not be appropriate for me to comment on matters related to any specific proposals. Although the development consent order for Cleve Hill Solar Park was granted by the previous government in 2020, as she said, the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero may still be involved in any proceedings relating to the implementation of that order. And as a result, I cannot comment today on the details of that project. The reasons for the decision and details of supporting plans are available on the Planning Inspectorate's website, as the Honourable Lady will well know. And I'm afraid I cannot elaborate or speculate on that published material. I thought the Honourable Member spoke very eloquently about the importance of this site to her constituents, about the views, about the biodiversity, the birds, the importance of wetlands. I know that my colleagues in DEFRA and I are working closely together on nature-based solutions to climate change, and wetlands play an important role. I'm glad she also acknowledged the importance of reaching our net zero objectives with that mission for clean power by 2030. So, as I said, I cannot speak specifically about Cleve Hill today, but I hope that I can give her some reassurance by speaking in general terms about government policy. First of all, it's a policy that ensures that all local impacts are considered in the planning process. And secondly, it's a policy that makes a steadfast commitment that those who host clean energy infrastructure should benefit from it. In order to achieve our goal of clean power by 2030, we will need to deploy various renewable energy sources. According to the recent NESO Clean Power Pathway report, we need to increase solar deployment from 15 gigawatts to 47 gigawatts. Along with onshore wind, solar is the cheapest clean power option available to us right now, making it an essential part of the UK's energy mix. And without a substantial increase in solar deployment, the clean power mission becomes very difficult. That is why my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, relaunched the Solar Task Force earlier this year. And that is the reason the Minister for Energy, who has this portfolio, cannot be here today to reply to the debate, because he's actually at the meeting of the Solar Task Force. The task force brings together industry and government to discuss the actions needed to rapidly increase deployment of solar panels on rooftops as well as solar farms. The task force will publish its recommendations in a solar roadmap very soon. We should never lose sight of the core motivation behind our clean energy mission. Clean power generated here in Britain will reduce our dependence on volatile imported fossil fuels. It will provide cheaper bills in the long term, and it will create thousands of highly skilled future-proof jobs across the country. Delivering these benefits for the British people does require the development of new infrastructure, and we do accept that a top priority should be deployment of solar on rooftops. That's why we're bringing forward new standards to ensure that all newly built houses and commercial buildings are fit for a net zero future. We will encourage the installation of solar panels on these buildings where appropriate. But we know that our mission will require more ground-mounted solar too. Decisive reform to the planning system is urgently needed to support this. As the Prime Minister said last week, we will streamline the approval process in the forthcoming Planning and Infrastructure Bill. As part of the new plan for change, in which the Prime Minister set out the milestones for how government will deliver on its national missions, we will work towards the new target of 150 major infrastructure projects, including energy projects. This would mean tripling the number of decisions on national infrastructure compared to the last Parliament. We do recognise the impact that such new energy projects can have on local communities and the environment. The government is committed to striking the right balance between these considerations when delivering the Clean Power mission. All proposed solar projects are subject to a robust planning process. Most projects are assessed by local planning authorities themselves, and these assessments are governed by the National Planning Policy Framework, which encourages developers to engage with local communities before submitting an application. Local planning authorities will continue to seek representations from local communities and will continue to weigh local considerations against the need for renewable energy. As the Honourable Member said, though, larger projects such as the Cleve Hill Solar Park are decided centrally through the nationally significant infrastructure regime. This is a rigorous process. Developers whose projects qualify for this assessment must complete considerable community engagement before any decision is taken. The level and quality of community engagement is taken into account by decision makers. As I've said, we do recognise that new infrastructure can have an impact on the local community, and the planning system is designed to take account of these, whether social, cultural, economic or environmental. Indeed, all large-scale solar developers are legally obliged to complete an environmental statement as part of any application for development consent. And the issue that the Honourable Member raised about disruption, and the Honourable Member for Strangford mentioned too, that would be something that would be considered as part of that environmental statement. The statement requires the developer to consider the potential environmental impact of a project, not just during the construction phase, but during its life. So it spans from pre-development, construction, operation, all the way to decommissioning. This statement is a helpful tool for planning authorities, allowing them to review any significant effects on biodiversity or the environment. I know that the Honourable Member is committed to improving the natural environment, and as I said, she spoke eloquently about the vision that she had for this part of her constituency. There is some evidence to suggest that solar can improve biodiversity when installed and managed appropriately, and I know that the environmental management plan for Cleve Hill includes commitments to build a habitat management area of 56 hectares, which is predicted to increase on-site biodiversity by 65%. I wanted to briefly touch, Dr. HoC, on the issue of the use of agricultural land for solar. I hope that I can reassure the Honourable Lady that the government recognises that food security is linked to national security, and that we will always back British farming. I know that in previous years we worked together on the all-party group for fruit and veg farming, and which she chaired, and I gained some knowledge from that over how important she regards standing up for farmers in her constituency. It is made clear in planning guidance that developers should situate their projects on brownfield or industrial sites whenever possible. Where the development of agricultural land is shown to be necessary, developers are steered away from using best and most versatile land, and we have no plans to change this. We do not believe, however, that the accelerated deployment of solar power poses a threat to food security. The total area of land devoted to solar farms nationally is very small. Even in the most ambitious scenarios, less than 1% of the UK's agricultural land would be occupied by solar farms. My colleagues at the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs are developing a land use framework which will consider issues such as food security and how we can expand nature-rich habitats. And this land use framework will work hand in hand with the Strategic Spatial Energy Plan. Can I just ask Dr. Huck, will the member be given a minute or two to reply at the end? Not in this one. Okay, cool. I will come on to the issue of battery safety. I note that the honourable member said that members were given some reassurance at the community meeting that she held, but they still have significant concerns about fire safety. As you will know, batteries are regulated by the Health and Safety Executive. The framework requires battery designers, installers and operators to take the necessary measures to ensure health and safety through all stages of the system's construction, operation and decommissioning. The government has updated the planning practice guidance to encourage battery storage developers to engage with local fire and rescue services and for local planning authorities to refer to guidance published by the National Fire Chiefs Council. And I know that she said that they were represented at the meeting she held. The health and safety framework for batteries is kept under review to respond to changing circumstances. In 2018, BEIS set up an industry-led electricity storage health and safety governance group whose members include the National Fire Chiefs Council, the Environment Agency and DEFRA. And it's that group which is responsible for ensuring that an appropriate, robust and future-proofed health and safety framework is sustained. My department worked with them to develop and publish health and safety guidance for grid-scale batteries, and that guidance aims to improve the understanding of existing health and safety standards which the battery storage industry should apply to its own processes. She mentioned DEFRA. As I understand it, DEFRA is considering further options, including environmental permitting for managing the environmental and public health risks from fire at grid-scale sites, and I would be happy to speak to my colleague in DEFRA who's responsible for that and get back to her in terms of her specific questions. She'll appreciate I can't answer on behalf of them today. And if there's any further reassurances that her constituents require on the safety issue, and indeed my honourable friend from Ashford would be happy to follow up in writing on that. Turning in the few minutes I have left on the community benefits, we absolutely understand that we need to fully engage with communities and bring them along with us on our clean power mission, and that includes public engagement and consultation. But she asked specifically about community benefits, and we know that communities are providing a service to the country as a whole when they host clean energy infrastructure, so there needs to be benefits for them. And sometimes that's a very direct benefit where is community-owned energy infrastructure, and the benefit goes straight back into the community, whether that's solar panels on a village hall or there's many other examples. But we're considering how best to deliver those community benefits to the host communities. This includes looking to existing examples in Europe and further afield to see what has worked well there. There are a wide variety of community benefits that can be delivered, including funding for local projects, investment in the local area, direct benefits to individuals, or, as I said, opportunities for community ownership. Great British Energy will build upon existing community energy schemes, helping communities to unlock opportunities through the local power plan. And I know that in the Honourable Lady's own constituency, up to 1,400 homes are powered by Orchard Community Energy, which is a community-owned solar farm near Sittingbourne, which provides power to Swale and Medway. And that puts communities at the heart of the energy transition, giving them a stake in that transition to net zero as owners and as partners in clean energy projects. As I said, my honourable friend, the Minister for Energy, is today at the meeting of the Solar Task Force, which brings together industry and government, and that is considering this question of how a community can benefit from the infrastructure that's hosted in their patch. Their recommendations will be published in the Solar Roadmap. So in conclusion, Dr Huck, the government is committed to considering the interests of local communities affected by proposed energy infrastructure. I would like to thank the Honourable Lady for securing this debate and giving me the opportunity to set out the government's vision. We will work to balance the local impact of new projects with the delivery of our clean power mission. The renewable energy transition will always be done through cooperation rather than coercion, ensuring all parties benefit on our journey to net zero. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the impact of Cleve Hill Solar Park on communities in Faversham and Mid Kent constituency? As many as are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. I think the ayes have it. Order. Sitting suspended until 2:30.